Baby steps.
After your faith hasn't let you down.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, a licensed therapist and certified life coach. And over the 13-year history of this podcast, we've shared a lot of listener essays, stories, reflections, and deeply personal explorations from you, the audience. And I've decided it's time to bring some of those voices back to life, to dust them off and, well, resurrect them. We'll call it the morning of the first resurrection. After all, resurrection is really about healing, restoring the body, mind, and soul to their most pristine, integrated state. So I thought, what if we could use modern tools like ChatGPT and Notebook LM to create a kind of AI puppet show? A thoughtful, playful deep dive into the mental health layers underneath these listener essays. Now, I'm creating this series for two audiences, primarily. First, for students studying for the National Counselor exam to help you explore these stories as real-world case studies. And second, for anyone who's ever wrestled with similar experiences to help you see the psychological and emotional insights that might apply to your own life. So, it's my pleasure to share these resurrected essays with you, renewed, reimagined, and ready for reflection. All right? Are you ready?
Hang on to your hats and glasses, 'cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
My lucky day. When asked why I left the Mormon Church, I often don't have a fast and easy answer. There was no single reason I left. There was a lifetime of experiences, a lot of personal study, a lot of truth-seeking. Then one day I found that my questions were bigger than the answers. I found my time in church on Sunday was no longer uplifting. It had become a place where I was drained of every ounce of my strength. My leaving didn't happen overnight. It happened over years. There were some last straws that broke the proverbial camel's back, and there were definitely some defining moments that made leaving easier. The following experience is one of those defining moments. Not a reason for my leaving as much as a clarifying moment when I thought, why the hell should I stay? My last trip to the temple turned out to be a pretty good finale to my Mormon life. First, the story leading up to the event. As your stake president, I don't feel I can sign your recommend today. It's clear that you don't sustain the leaders and you don't believe in the main tenets of the gospel. What I'm trying to tell you, President Marshall, is that though I respect and sustain the church leadership, I would just like to see the church take a stronger stance on domestic violence. I know of individuals in my own ward who deal with spousal abuse and child abuse in their homes, and they're getting no support from the church. The door to the office shut behind me, and it hit me that for the first time in my life, I was being denied the approval I needed to enter the temple, to practice one of the most important principles of my religion. How can one man have this kind of control over my life? As I thought about my conversation with President Marshall about the problems of domestic violence in the church, I recalled a conversation with my friend Karen I had had 3 months previous. Wow, Karen, has anyone else read your journals? I had no idea you and the kids were going through this. Why don't you leave? Craig will find me, Karen tells me, her hands visibly shaking. He said if I leave, he will find me and the kids and we'll pay for it. I'm pregnant again and I do not want to put another child in this situation. My therapist at LDS Social Services has read my journals and has heard everything. He thinks I should stay and make it work, but it's not going to work. I can't believe anyone at LDS Social Services would read this and tell you to stay. Your therapist must be a crazy person. I'm going to leave as soon as the baby's born. It will be summer, the kids will be out of school, my job will be changing too, and I can transfer to another city. You need to involve the police. This is serious bad stuff, Karen. I don't know if you're safe waiting it out. I think I'll be okay. Craig's working nights and is only home. We're all away. I don't want to call the police until the kids and I are safe. 2 weeks after my initial interview with the stake president, I tried again. And every 2 weeks for the next 6 months, each interview proving to be more frustrating than the previous one. For some reason, President Marshall has an issue with me and somehow believes I'm not worthy because, as he sees it, I don't sustain the leaders. "Who is the head of your household, sister?" President Marshall asks during one of our many interviews. "Is your husband at the head of your household?" My reply was evidently not what he wanted to hear. Both my husband and I are the head of our household. It's important to both of us that we lead together and our children see us as equals. I paused. Then I asked, "President Marshall, did you receive a letter from Elder Marion D. Hanks on my behalf?" I knew he had because I had written Elder Hanks a few weeks previous, explaining the situation and asking him if he thought that what the stake president was basing his decision on was a legitimate issue. I had received a copy of the letter Elder Hanks had written to the stake president, urging him to reconsider his stance. Elder Hanks wrote, "I know Sister Cyril, and I know her heart. I vouch for her worthiness and her honest desire to go to the temple." President Marshall folded his hands on the desk in front of him. "I did receive his letter, and my decision stays the same. It's obvious to me you have a problem with patriarchy, and if you don't honor the priesthood, you are not sustaining our leaders, and you are not worthy of a temple recommend." I was astonished. "I can't believe, President, that because I'm speaking up for women and children who are being abused and violated that you are concluding I'm unworthy. We have been meeting for 6 months, and I still have no recommend. What do I have to do in order to prove my worthiness and get your signature on this piece of paper?" 3 months and 4 interviews later, I'm in the church foyer waiting to talk to President Marshall once again. I'm a little uncomfortable because Craig, the abusive husband of my friend Karen, is also waiting for an interview. I'm not sure if Craig knows of my friendship with his wife. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Karen would be the last person to let on that anyone knew of the situation. "Are you waiting to talk to President Marshall?" Craig asks. "Yes, you too, I suppose." Craig flashes his temple recommend. "Yep, waiting to get my recommend signed. Just got the bishop's signature." I distract myself, hoping to end the conversation with this vile man. First of all, I can't believe with what the bishop knows about Craig that he would sign his recommend. Karen has met with the bishop as well as her therapist many times seeking advice, only to be told to do what it takes to make her marriage work. Why do I even care, I think to myself. This experience has been horrible. I can't believe these men are inspired. Well, maybe President Marshall will withhold Craig's recommend. I can't imagine he would sign his recommend, seeing how he has given me such a difficult time. It doesn't take inspiration to figure out that Craig is a total douchebag. The door to the stake president's office opens and Craig walks in, and, no kidding, 20 minutes later walks out with a signed recommend. "Must be my lucky day," Craig says as he gives me a look that somehow tells me he knows of my friendship with his wife. My stomach wrenches and I have to look away. The irony of the situation is baffling to me. Here I am, for close to a year now, trying to get my recommend signed. And the reason I can't get it signed, just walked out of the president's office with a little slip of paper stating his worthiness is greater than mine in the eyes of President Marshall. Ergo the church, ergo God. My thoughts are racing. President Marshall obviously doesn't know Craig. Craig must have lied, saying whatever it took to get his recommend signed. They aren't difficult questions after all. Yes, 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 no, yes. The answers are simple enough. I walked into the president's office and I see the man who I've been contending with for the last several months in a strange new light. For the first time, I noticed the framed license on his wall, stating that he is a licensed therapist working for LDS Social Services. This is too coincidental, I think. I'll have to ask Karen who her therapist is. "You know Brother President Marshall asks. "Yes, he's in my ward. I'm good friends with his wife, Karen. We know each other quite well." My reply seems to strike a chord with him, and for some unexplained reason, I leave his office that day with my recommend signed. Must be my lucky day. The recommend in my hand didn't seem like a gift or a prize. It seemed like a worthless slip of paper. I wanted to wad it up and throw it into the trash. So much had happened over the last year. Karen had a baby boy and was still planning her escape from an abusive marriage. I had made my own self-discoveries and was dealing with the idea of being gay, yet still remaining in my marriage and the church. I laughed as I thought about what President Marshall might think if he knew that story. By this time, I had figured out that these men who had jurisdiction over my worthiness didn't need to know everything about me. Besides, it's not a sin to be gay, only to act gay. At least now I can go to the temple with Linda. Linda had been telling me how she wanted me to go with her because she was doing work for her ancestors. I guess I could muster the spirituality to go with Linda this week. Ward Temple Day was on Saturday. I left the president's office and headed down the hallway to attend Relief Society meeting. I sat down next to Karen. Karen, who's your therapist at LDS Social Services? It didn't surprise me when she told me that it was President Marshall. I didn't hear a word of the lesson that day, something about charity or some such thing. Linda and I met up on Saturday morning and headed up to the temple. My heart wasn't completely in it, but I knew it was important to Linda, and I thought I could dig down deep and create a spiritual experience. We arrived at the temple and eventually made our way to the room where we would be for the next hour or so to participate in what is considered by believing Mormons a sacred ritual. Fast forward to the end of the session, where they asked for people to go to the front of the room and stand in a circle for a prayer. Linda, myself, and several others walked up to the front and stood at the altar. In way of explanation, for those of you not familiar with the ceremony, there needs to be an equal number of men and women in the circle, so when there's a man or a woman by themselves without a person of the opposite sex with them, they will call someone up from the group to balance the numbers. Male, female, around in a circle, the man to the right and the woman to the left, in couples. On this occasion, I'm without a male partner. The man conducting the session asked for a male volunteer to stand with me in the prayer circle. Now, you may think I'm making this next bit up, but I'm not. This really happened. I'm standing there waiting for someone to come stand with me in the prayer circle, and up walks, wait for it, yes, you're right, up walks Craig. What are the chances? I guess it was my lucky day. Up to this point, I hadn't noticed him, but now here I am, standing next to him in the prayer circle. I hear the officiator say, "If any of you have unkind feelings about anyone in the circle, we ask that you withdraw." What do? I do not like this man. I have very unkind feelings towards him. Oh well, pretend. Just like you've been doing all your life. After a few more words, we are asked to take the hand of the person next to us in a symbolic grip called the patriarchal grip. Ironic, right? I wanted to leave the circle. I wanted to stand up for Karen and all the women like her and somehow call Craig out for all of the physical and sexual abuse he had perpetrated on his family. But I didn't. I stood there with Craig to my right, holding my hand in the patriarchal grip. I'm not sure if he was aware that I knew what kind of a man he was, but somehow I think he did know, and this was his way of being in control and having a bit of power over me. If I did sit down, he would know for sure that Karen had told me things, and this might put her in danger, so I suppose pretending was the best thing to do. The prayer circle finished up, and we proceeded to the next part of the temple session. Eventually, Linda and I are in the celestial room. Where on a more typical day, I might have felt calm and peace. But now I'm feeling very uncomfortable, and all I want to do is run from this room screaming. I quickly exit and return to the safest place in the temple, the ladies' locker room. I guess it was my lucky day.
Special musical number.
My beloved brothers and sisters, I pray that I may be guided. Baby, come back. Any kind of fool could truly see there was something in everything about you. Baby, come back. You could blame it all on me. I was wrong.
That was a great old listener essay from Infants on Thrones. newly resurrected on the first morning of a personal reckoning, dressed up like a temple trip, to stand before the judgment bar of, well, maybe not a judgment bar, but a room full of social scripts, spiritual pretense, and patriarchal expectations. Presented now as an AI puppet show like the one you're hearing right now.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. So today we're really digging into something heavy, spiritual trauma and moral injury.
Right. And our mission here, if you will, is to step into the role of a therapist. We're looking at a clinical case study. We're calling her Jill. And we're going to use, standard psychological lenses to see how this kind of deep institutional conflict really impacts someone's identity, their nervous system, their moral core.
Exactly. And we know we've got kind of two main groups of listeners today, so we want to speak to both of you.
Yeah. So if you're a counseling student, maybe prepping for the NCE, definitely pay attention. We'll be covering diagnostic reasoning, ethical codes, how different theories fit together, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And if you're here just because you're curious, or maybe because you've had your own run-ins with, let's say, high-demand groups or institutions, well, this deep dive is for you too.
It's kind of a shortcut, maybe, to understanding that really complex tangle between faith, your body's reactions, and, where your boundaries lie.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine you're the therapist. Jill walks into your office, first session. Her voice, it's steady, she's articulate, right?
Yeah.
But there's this weight behind it.
You can hear the exhaustion, definitely. Maybe some betrayal under the surface. But something else, too.
Yeah, like a clarity, a kind of hard-won resolve. And she tells her story. It's not bitter exactly, but it's precise, almost like she's describing the pain clinically.
Okay, so let's unpack that story. What strikes you immediately? For me, it's often how the deepest wounds aren't from one big bang, but this slow, quiet erosion. What was going on with her before the big crisis moment?
Well, that's exactly how Jill describes it. Years of what she called quiet unraveling. It wasn't like one dramatic exit. It was more a slow leak of vitality, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
She'd spent decades finding real meaning in her church, but then she hit this point where, as she put it, the questions became bigger than the answers the institution could offer.
Oh, that phrase. The questions became bigger than the answers.
Mm-hmm.
That just screams cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's like this constant grinding feeling when your own sense of morality, your own complex view of the world just keeps bumping up against this rigid, maybe oversimplified external script.
Right, and that friction takes a toll.
Which explains why she felt so drained, right?
Right.
Physically gone, she said, in the very place that was supposed to be uplifting.
And that physical brain, that's a huge clue. It tells us the biological cost of just maintaining that conflict was getting really high.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't just like phoning it in. She was showing up, trying to make it work, but burning through massive emotional energy just trying to fit.
And that quiet unraveling, eventually it hits a breaking point. The moment of reckoning, we could call it. And for Jill, it wasn't some abstract theological debate. It was raw, ethical, personal.
Yeah, it crystallized when she started advocating for women she knew were in abusive situations.
Okay, so she tries to live out the values the church professes, right?
Yeah.
Protection, charity.
Exactly. But the leadership's response, it was immediate and, well, crushing. She was told she didn't sustain the leaders.
Wow. So her moral action gets twisted into, insubordination.
Precisely. It's a kind of psychological reframing that basically pathologizes her empathy to protect the institution.
And while that systemic failure wasn't maybe the only reason she eventually left, it sounds like it was the moment the question shifted.
Completely. It went from, how can I fix this, to why the hell should I even stay in this?
That's a huge shift. That's moving from maybe the problem is me to, wait, maybe the problem is the system.
And that shift brings us right to the individual who kind of embodied that system for her, President Marshall, the local church leader.
Ah, Marshall, the gatekeeper.
Literally. For a whole year, he refused her what's called a temple recommend.
And just for context, that's like the essential pass, right?
Yeah.
It signifies you're in good standing, worthy to participate in the most sacred rituals.
Exactly. And his refusal wasn't about doctrine or sin in the usual sense.
Yeah.
It was purely because she challenged how the church, or at least how he, handled abuse cases.
And his justification, his diagnosis of her.
This is where it gets really insidious. He told her, quote, "It's obvious to me you have a problem with patriarchy."
Wow. Just wow. Wow. Weaponizing a psychological term problem to shut down a moral concern.
Well,
deflecting accountability by making it her flaw.
it's classic institutional gaslighting. And this is where, especially for our NCE students listening, the ethical alarm bells should be absolutely blaring, because there's a detail here about Marshall that takes this beyond just bad leadership.
Okay.
It's a catastrophic ethical breach. The source material indicates Marshall wasn't just her ecclesiastical leader.
He was also an LDS therapist.
Yes, and crucially, he was the therapist who had advised Jill's friend, Karen, the abuse victim Jill was advocating for, to stay with her violent husband.
Hold on. Let's really slow down there. He's her church leader and Karen's therapist simultaneously.
Correct. Two distinct roles, two spheres of authority.
Okay, so how does that dual role make things worse? How does it enable the abuse?
Well, it creates an immediate, unavoidable conflict of interest, doesn't it? As a therapist, his absolute first responsibility under ethical codes is Karen's well-being, her safety, her autonomy.
Right. Do no harm.
But as an ecclesiastical leader in that specific context, his allegiance often defaults to preserving the family unit, protecting the church's reputation, upholding the authority structure.
So when those two roles collide, like they obviously did here.
The institutional role usually wins out. It introduces incredibly harmful bias, an inappropriate power dynamic. He essentially used his therapeutic role to enforce an institutional agenda, which meant Karen's safety was compromised and the abuser faced no real consequences from that corner.
And Jill saw this unfolding. She wasn't passive about it.
No, not at all. She tried advocating respectfully. She even contacted a higher-up, a general authority, who apparently vouched for her, said she was worthy.
But Marshall still blocked her recommend.
For a year. It really shows that, in that local power dynamic, upholding Marshall's authority trumped everything else Jill's moral stance, even the word of a higher leader. She poured energy into navigating the system, only to find her own integrity didn't count if it questioned the local boss.
Which leads us to this climax, this really painful moment. She finally gets the recommend, but it feels totally empty. Why?
Because Karen's abuser, Craig, also got his recommend. Easily. And then he twists the knife, sees Jill, presumably knows about the struggle she went through, and flaunts his own recommend, saying, "Must be my lucky day."
That phrase captures the whole moral injury, doesn't it? The system rewards the perpetrator and exhausts the person trying to do the right thing. The injustice is just so blatant it rocks her entire world.
And then comes the ritual itself, the temple scene. Inside the temple, during a sacred prayer circle, Jill is placed right next to Craig, the abuser.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Holding hands even, in what's specifically called the patriarchal grip in that ritual.
Just think about the sensory overload there, the psychological horror. Forced into the sacred, intimate space with the very person who represents the system's total failure to protect her friend.
And her internal state must have been pure conflict. She's pretending she has to stay silent, perform the ritual, basically protect herself and maybe Karen too, by just not making waves.
And then the officiator says something.
Yeah, the officiator says, "If any of you have unkind feelings about anyone in the circle, we ask that you withdraw."
Which basically makes honesty impossible. If she speaks her truth that she has very justified unkind feelings about the abuser next to her, she becomes the problem. She's the one disrupting the harmony.
Exactly. It mandates performance over truth. So she stayed. But the ritual. Completely hollowed out. That recommend she fought for, it felt like an insult, not a validation. Her body, though. Her body was screaming the truth the whole time, even in silence. And that silence, we need to understand, wasn't weakness, it was survival.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We've heard the story, the narrative. Now we put on our therapist hats. We need to go beyond the story to see the whole person. And the best tool for that, especially thinking about the NCE, is the biopsychosocial model, the BPS.
Right, the BPS model, it's all about seeing the person holistically. It's not just about diagnosing, say, depression. It's understanding how the body stuff, the chemistry,
okay,
the psychological thoughts, feelings, coping mechanisms,
got it,
and the social spirits of the environment, the community, the belief system, how all those things are interconnected and feeding into the distress.
Makes sense. So let's start with the biological, the body story. You mentioned the physical drain. The source material implies chronic stress. What would that look like physically after a year of that kind of conflict?
Oh, you'd expect her nervous system to be just wired.
Incredible.
Constantly in high alert. We're talking the sympathetic nervous system basically stuck in the on position.
So not just feeling worried, but like physically tense.
Yeah, hypervigilant, always scanning for threats, maybe without even realizing it. You'd likely see Insomnia, maybe chronic muscle tension, neck, shoulders, jaw are common. Digestive issues are really frequent too. Her body's basically primed for fight or flight, 24/7, even when she's sitting in church.
And we'll get to the opposite of that, the freeze response, in a bit. But that high alert state has a huge biological cost.
Absolutely. Okay, moving to the psychological side, the inner world.
Yeah.
The biggest thing jumping out is that intense cognitive dissonance we talked about.
Right, the clashing beliefs causing pain.
She's trapped between, I'm a person of integrity, I speak truth, and if I challenge this authority, I'm somehow bad or unworthy.
Right.
That friction is just unbearable.
So how does she cope? What defense mechanisms are showing up?
We see some sophisticated ones. That dark humor, the sarcasm, must be my lucky day. It's a form of intellectualization, right? Distancing from the raw pain by observing it wryly.
Okay.
There's also suppression. Staying quiet in the circle, consciously pushing down the anger and hurt. And maybe passive resistance, staying physically present but emotionally checked out, draining the ritual of meaning for herself. These are ways to manage an impossible situation where you have to control your emotions to survive socially.
And her mood. It sounds complex.
Oh, very. Disillusionment, definitely. Fatigue, low energy. But also this undercurrent of righteous anger. What's really healthy, though, is her thinking. She's clear, morally grounded. Her core self seems intact, even though the system tried to make her doubt it.
Right. Okay, lastly, the social and spiritual factors. This is the context, the environment causing the injury.
And it's clearly rooted in this highly rigid, patriarchal, hierarchical faith community, a structure that denied her basic autonomy and invalidated her moral concerns.
Which naturally leads to an identity crisis, doesn't it?
Huge. She's caught between this really deep, primal need to belong to her community, her tribe, and an equally urgent need to protect herself, especially, as the source hints, around her potentially hidden LGBTQ plus identity in a system that's strictly heteronormative. The very place that offers comfort also poses an existential threat.
But she has friends, Karen and Linda.
Yes, and that's crucial. Having those secure, supportive relationships outside the toxic power dynamic is a massive protective factor. It shows she can form healthy attachments, even when the larger community relationship is deeply wounded.
Okay, let's layer on some developmental psychology. James Fowler's faith development theory seems relevant here. Where would Jill fit?
Oh, absolutely. Based on everything, Jill is squarely in stage 4, individuative reflective faith.
Okay, break that down. Stage 3 is where most people are, right? Inheriting beliefs.
Exactly. Stage 3, synthetic conventional, is where your faith and identity are kind of fused with your group, your culture. You absorb it. Stage 4 is when you consciously step back. You start critically examining the beliefs you were given. You question the authorities, the inconsistencies, the paradoxes.
And you start building your own theology.
Precisely. You take personal responsibility for your beliefs and values. And this often leads to a clash, a necessary crisis, with the institution that handed you the original beloved package. Jill's quiet unraveling and her direct challenge to Marshall. That is the stage 4 crisis playing out. She's trying to integrate her own moral authority with the external authority, and they're in conflict.
And Erickson's stages, where might she be?
Given her life stage and focus, likely navigating generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is that drive to contribute something meaningful, to care for the next generation, to make a positive impact.
It's like advocating for Karen.
Exactly. Her primary attempt at generativity, protecting vulnerable women, was actively punished. The system blocked her contribution. This can lead to profound distress, that feeling of stagnation, like you're stuck, unable to do good within the community you care about.
And attachment theory, you mentioned her friends.
Yeah, despite the relational trauma from the leadership and the community's failure, Jill seems to demonstrate what we'd call an earned, secure attachment style.
Meaning
that even with difficult early or ongoing relational experiences, she's developed the capacity for insight, for healthy connection, for trust in safe relationships like with Karen and Linda. She didn't shut down entirely or become chaotically attached in response to the betrayal. She found her footing, ethically speaking. That resilience is key for her recovery.
Okay, this is a lot to synthesize. Let's try to frame the clinical problem clearly now. If Jill is sitting in front of you, what's the summary?
Okay, clinical summary. Client presents with significant disillusionment, moral conflict, and spiritual grief stemming from experiences of systemic abuse, ethical violations by leadership, and unresolved identity conflicts within a high-demand, rigid religious community.
And the core issue, the term that really captures her suffering.
It's moral injury.
Yeah.
This is so important to grasp. It's not exactly PTSD, though it feels like trauma. Moral injury happens when someone perpetrates, fails to prevent, or witnesses actions that deeply violate their own moral code, especially when pressured by authority.
So Jill experienced it from multiple angles, witnessing Karen's situation, Marshall's complicity.
And being forced to participate in a lie, essentially. Staying silent in that prayer circle, pretending everything was fine when her conscience was screaming, that violates her integrity.
Right. Unlike PTSD, which is often rooted in fear for one's life, moral injury is about the shattering of trust, the betrayal of what's right, the violation of conscience.
Exactly. Her trust in the system, and maybe even in herself for having stayed or complied under duress, was broken.
Okay, so if moral injury isn't an official DSM diagnosis, how do we capture this for clinical purposes, especially for NCE prep?
Good question. We use diagnoses that frame the context and the symptoms. Two main options here.
Option 1
is a Z code. Z65.8, religious or spiritual problem. Now remember, for the exam, Z codes are not mental disorders.
Right, they're context codes.
They signal that the main reason for the person's distress is related to their beliefs, their rituals, or the structure and authority within their spiritual community.
Why is that important here?
Because it correctly frames Jill's problem as stemming from the external situation, how her religion was administered, the abusive dynamics, rather than an internal flaw or pathology in her. She's not anti-faith, she's injured by the faith system's actions. This code keeps the focus on the social stressor.
Okay, makes sense. And option 2, a clinical diagnosis.
A temporary one that fits well is F43.23 adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood.
Why adjustment disorder?
Because her significant psychological distress, the anxiety, the low mood, the fatigue, the difficulty functioning spiritually and socially, is a direct reaction to an identifiable stressor.
The whole spiritual crisis and moral conflict situation.
Exactly. An adjustment disorder usually develops within about 3 months of the stressor and causes real impairment. It acknowledges her suffering is serious, but emphasizes it's a reaction to extreme circumstances, not necessarily a long-term intrinsic disorder.
And we'd need to consider other possibilities too, right? Differentials.
Absolutely. You want to monitor for major depressive disorder. Are the symptoms pervasive, meeting full criteria, affecting sleep, appetite significantly?
Okay.
And definitely consider comorbid issues. Could there be PTSD symptoms from witnessing Karen's abuse, or even from Marshall's actions, which felt threatening?
Vicarious trauma.
Yes. And critically, given the context, we have to assess for distress related to internalized homophobia. The constant pressure to hide a core part of her identity in that environment absolutely contributes to the stress, the need to pretend, the emotional exhaustion.
Right. That layer adds significant complexity. Okay, let's circle back to Marshall's actions, specifically the ethical breaches. This seems like prime NCE material.
It really is. We're looking squarely at the ACA Code of Ethics, specifically 8.6a on dual relationships.
Explain that again in this context.
Marshall, acting as both Karen's therapist and Jill's and Karen's ecclesiastical leader, is a textbook violation. The roles have conflicting loyalties and power dynamics.
Therapist loyalty is to the client's well-being. Leader loyalty is often to the institution.
And when they conflict, as they did here, the potential for harm is enormous. He couldn't ethically serve both roles. His failure to maintain clear boundaries directly contributed to enabling the abuse and harming both Karen and Jill.
And it also violates another core principle.
Yes, A1A primary responsibility. A counselor's primary job is to promote the client's welfare. Marshall clearly prioritized the institution's perceived needs, maintaining patriarchal order, avoiding scandal over Karen's safety and Jill's moral integrity. He fundamentally betrayed the counseling ethic by pathologizing Jill's valid concerns.
Okay, we've defined the problem, looked at diagnoses, ethics. Now, how do we help Jill heal? What theoretical frameworks offer the most traction?
I think 3 frameworks are particularly powerful here. First, existential therapy.
Thinking Yalom Frankel, meaning freedom, responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jill is grappling with huge existential questions. Why stay? Is my silence making me complicit? Who am I outside this structure? What's the point of authenticity if it costs me everything?
So the therapy helps her confront those directly.
Yes. It helps her reconnect with her own values, separate from what she was told to value. It empowers her to see she has the freedom and the responsibility to make authentic choices now, even if past choices felt forced. It's about rebuilding a sense of meaning and purpose that is self-authored, not institutionally assigned.
Okay, framework number 2 seems obvious but necessary.
Feminist therapy. This case is practically a textbook example of why it's needed.
Because the male authority figure literally told her she had a problem with patriarchy for questioning abuse.
Precisely. Feminist therapy centers on empowerment, validating the client's lived experience, and understanding how personal struggles are often rooted in political or systemic oppression.
So it validates her anger.
Absolutely. It reframes her suffering not as a personal failing, but as a predictable, understandable reaction to an oppressive patriarchal system. The therapy helps her name the injustice, connect her story to larger patterns of spiritual abuse or institutional betrayal, and build skills to set firm boundaries against controlling systems. It shifts the shame from her back onto the system where it belongs.
Powerful. And the third framework?
Narrative therapy. Think Michael White, David Epstein. Key ideas are externalizing the problem and helping the client reauthor their life story.
How does externalizing work here?
Jill internalized the message, "I am unworthy," because she challenged Marshall. Narrative therapy helps her separate herself from that message. We literally talk about the unworthiness belief as something external that the system imposed on her, not as an inherent truth about her.
So the problem isn't in Jill, it's acting on Jill.
Exactly. Then the reauthoring part involves focusing on times she resisted the problem's influence, her advocacy for Karen, her quiet defiance, her eventual clarity. We help her build a new story, not about being a failed member, but maybe about being a courageous truth teller, someone whose integrity was too strong for a compromised system. The goal is that powerful shift. Maybe I'm not unworthy. Maybe the system was unworthy of me.
That restores so much agency. Okay, so those are the frameworks. What specific interventions might flow from them?
All right, practical tools. 1, values clarification, using exercises, maybe card sorts, journaling, to help her consciously identify her core values: justice, honesty, compassion, whatever they are, separate from the church's prescribed values of obedience or conformity.
And the rationale.
To give her a reliable internal compass for future decisions, reduce that cognitive dissonance, and restore her sense of autonomy.
Makes sense. Intervention 2.
Psychoeducation, giving her information, language, concepts like religious trauma syndrome, RTS, characteristics of high control groups, the dynamics of moral injury.
Why is just giving information therapeutic?
Because it validates her experience like nothing else. It normalizes her reactions. Oh, this is a known pattern. I'm not crazy. It reduces shame, externalizes the blame, and empowers her with understanding. Knowledge is power here.
Okay.
Somatic and grounding techniques. Because her body is holding so much stress, that high alert state, the freeze response talk therapy isn't enough. We need body-based tools.
Like what?
Things informed by polyvagal theory. Simple breathing exercises to calm the nervous system, mindful movement, maybe progressive muscle relaxation. Anything that helps her reconnect with her body safely and learn to regulate those intense states of hypoarousal.
Right, addressing the physical side. And 4.
Identity integration work. Specifically, creating a completely safe, affirming space for her to explore her LGBTQ plus identity, if that's part of her story, and figure out how it fits with her spirituality, outside the judgment of the old institution.
Why is that integration so key?
Because hiding or compartmentalizing a core part of yourself is incredibly draining and contributes hugely to that feeling of inauthenticity and dissonance.
Yeah.
Helping her see herself as whole, integrating all parts of her identity, is fundamental to healing.
This brings us squarely to the mind-body connection. You've mentioned the body holding the trauma. Let's dive deeper there.
Yes, this is critical. Jill's story, especially that temple scene, is profoundly physiological. Her body knew there was danger and betrayal long before her conscious mind maybe fully articulated it.
And the framework for understanding this is polyvagal theory.
Exactly. Dr. Stephen Porges' work. It's become essential for trauma therapy because it maps our nervous system's hierarchy of response to perceived safety or danger.
Okay, give us the quick version. 3 main states.
Right. At the top, the best place, is the ventral vagal system. That's your safe and social mode. You feel connected, calm, open, curious. You can relate to others.
Okay, what happens when there's a threat?
We drop down a level to the sympathetic nervous system. Classic fight or flight. Heart pounds, muscles tense, energy mobilizes. You're ready to confront the danger or run away.
But what if you can't fight or flee? Like Jill in the prayer circle.
Then you drop to the oldest, most primitive state, the dorsal vagal system. This triggers the freeze shutdown response. Think of an opossum playing dead.
So, numbness, dissociation, feeling empty.
Exactly. The body basically slams on the brakes when the threat feels overwhelming and inescapable. Moving, fighting, speaking feels impossible or too dangerous.
And Jill's experience standing stock still, holding the abuser's hand, silenced by the implicit threat of censure.
That is a textbook dorsal vagal shutdown. Her nervous system made a split-second calculation. Freezing is safer than fighting, speaking out, or fleeing, walking out.
So the huge reframe for Jill is,
she didn't stay silent out of weakness or because she agreed with what was happening. She stayed silent because her physiology took over for survival. That feeling of emptiness wasn't lack of faith. It was dissociation from an unbearable reality. Her body was protecting her in the only way it could.
wow, that validation must be incredibly healing. It shifts the narrative from self-blame to understanding a biological imperative.
Precisely. It honors the body's wisdom.
And the hope here is that this isn't permanent. The brain can change.
Yes. That's neuroplasticity. Our brains are constantly adapting based on experience. If Jill spent a year in that high-alert, betrayal-filled environment, the neural pathways for threat detection got really strong, like superhighways.
But therapy can build new roads.
Therapy, especially when it includes validation, new insights, and those somatic practices, helps create new neural pathways. Every time she reclaims her story, sets a boundary, feels safe, connects with her values, a new connection forms. I am strong, I am worthy, I can trust myself.
And over time, those new pathways become the default.
That's the goal. Moving from survival mode, run by the old trauma pathways, to a state of self-trust and regulation, run by these new, healthier pathways. We're literally helping her rewire her brain for safety.
Which connects to the broader biological picture too, right? Psychoneuroimmunology, PNI.
Yeah, PNI looks at how our psychological state directly impacts our nervous system and our immune system.
So that chronic invalidation from Marshall, being told her moral compass was wrong for a year, that wasn't just emotionally painful.
No, it was a chronic biological stressor. Every invalidating comment, every dismissal likely triggered a stress response cortisol release via the HPA axis, the body's main stress pathway.
And chronic stress hormones are bad news.
Very bad news long term. They can lead to that profound fatigue Jill felt, burnout, brain fog, and even suppress the immune system, making her more vulnerable to getting sick. The emotional wounds literally manifest physically.
So healing has to address the body. What are the key ingredients the nervous system needs to heal from that kind of institutional stress?
It needs the exact things that were denied in that temple experience, and by Marshall's actions: safety, choice, and agency.
Safety, feeling secure, not threatened. Choice, having options, not being forced. Agency, feeling like you have control over your life and body.
If therapy consistently provides those three things, her nervous system can finally shift out of defense mode, down-regulate, and begin to repair.
Okay, let's synthesize all of this. We've gone deep into Jill's story, the clinical concepts. Bringing it back to the human level, how does therapy actually help someone like Jill move forward?
Well, first and foremost, it provides safety. A relationship, maybe the first one in a long time, related to these issues, where she doesn't have to pretend, where her anger, her grief, her questions are welcomed, not judged or shut down. Just being truly seen is profoundly healing.
Second,
reflection and validation. Her moral outrage, which the institution labeled a problem, gets reframed in therapy as wisdom, as integrity. The therapist acts as a mirror reflecting back her strength and clarity, confirming that her internal compass was working perfectly fine. It was the external system that was broken.
And third,
repatterning. Using all those tools we discussed, from existential exploration to narrative reauthoring to somatic grounding, she actively rewires those old beliefs and responses. She learns to define power, worthiness, spirituality on her own terms, disentangled from the oppressive messages she absorbed.
So the ultimate message therapy offers isn't, here's what you should believe now, but
it's giving her unwavering permission, maybe for the first time, to believe herself, to trust her own experience, her own body, her own moral compass. That's the restoration of autonomy.
So for people listening who might hear echoes of Jill's story in their own lives, when does this kind of spiritual conflict or institutional hurt cross the line into needing professional support? When should someone seek therapy?
That's a really important question. I'd say seek help if spiritual settings, practices, or even just thinking about the institution consistently triggers intense anxiety, pervasive guilt, flashbacks, or a feeling of emotional numbness.
Okay. What else?
If there's a chronic, painful clash between your core values, what you know deep down is right, especially around justice, safety, or personal autonomy, and the doctrines or demands of your faith community, and it's causing significant ongoing distress.
If you're constantly being invalidated.
Yes. If leaders or the community repeatedly dismiss your experiences, your pain, your reality, That authoritative invalidation is incredibly damaging over time.
And maybe the biggest red flag.
Feeling like you have to pretend. If you spend significant energy suppressing your true thoughts, feelings, or identity just to stay safe or maintain harmony within the group, that constant performance, that emotional armor, often leads to burnout, numbing, or even physical symptoms like chronic tension. That's your body signaling something is deeply wrong.
Okay. Let's bring it back to that opening quote, the infants on thrones metaphor, and try to summarize Jill's journey through that lens.
Right. Jill's story is fundamentally about a soul that, you could say, outgrew its skin. The faith system that once nurtured her became, when weaponized by rigid patriarchy and denial, a kind of prison.
She left the circle not just by physically leaving the church eventually, but by waking up inside that temple moment, realizing the ritual forced on her was meaningless, even harmful.
And the throne, in this metaphor, isn't President Marshall's seat of power. The true throne is her own internal authority, her nervous system signaling danger and truth, her conscience guiding her toward integrity.
And the infant?
The infant is that awakening self, the part of her that remained curious, brave, willing to question, even when it was terrifying. She's now nurturing that infant self through healing, through rewiring. She's not broken, she's emerging.
She's healing, but giving herself what the institution denied: safety, choice, and agency.
Exactly.
So, the final thought for you, our listener. If healing truly begins by giving our nervous system what was denied by the institution: safety, choice, and agency, what institutional pressures in your life, whether religious, familial, corporate, or societal, might be currently forcing your body into a state of fight, flight, or freeze?
And with that, the AI Puppet Show endeth. We know what you're thinking. Your lucky day.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.